My name is Richard, and I'm 35 years old. I live in Tallinn with my wife, Anna. We've been married for 4 years. Things had been going well. Not perfect, but good. We didn't fight much, we enjoyed each other's company, and we had a nice, quiet life in our 2-story house. No kids yet, but we talked about it. We were comfortable, in a predictable kind of way. But something started to change, slowly at first, and I didn't know what it was. It wasn't anything big, just little things. Anna began spending more time away from home. She started going to dance lessons. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd always liked dancing, and I figured it was just a hobby for her, something to clear her head after work. But the lessons started piling up. She'd go a couple of times a week, then it was 3 or 4 times. Then she was coming home later and later, saying she had to stay after class to work on stuff. Struggling with the material, she'd say. I didn't mind giving her space, but there was a distance growing between us that I couldn't ignore. I started hearing more about her dance instructor, Victor. She'd talk about him a lot. How skilled he was, how much she learned from him. It seemed innocent enough at first, but there was something about the way she spoke that made me uncomfortable. Like, there was more admiration in her voice than I thought was normal for a teacher-student relationship. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One day, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise her. I'd bought her a necklace, a little something to show I was thinking of her. But when I got home, she wasn't there. It wasn't unusual, she had dance class, after all. But the house felt empty, quieter than usual, and that's when I remembered something she'd said earlier. I've got a late lesson today, but Victor said I could leave early. He's got another class right after mine, so I'll be in a rush. I don't know why, but that line stuck with me. It was nothing, really, but it nagged at me. So I grabbed the bouquet of roses I had planned to give her and drove over to the building where her lessons were. When I pulled into the lot, I saw her car parked in its usual spot. I told myself I was overthinking it. Nothing to worry about. But something in my gut felt wrong, like I was about to find out something I wasn't ready to face. I parked a little further away and decided to wait. I figured I'd surprise her when she came out. But as I sat there, waiting, I saw them. Anna and Victor, walking out of the building. She was standing too close to him, her hand on his arm, laughing. It wasn't just a friendly conversation. There was something more there, something that told me everything I needed to know. I wanted to confront them right then and there, but I stayed quiet. I took out my phone and quietly filmed them, just to have proof. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew what was happening. I stayed in my car, heart pounding in my chest, not sure what to do. It felt like I was suffocating. There they were, Anna and Victor, standing close to each other, laughing like they had some inside joke. I couldn't help but watch as Victor leaned in to say something, too intimate for a teacher-student relationship. His hand brushed against her shoulder, and I could see her smile, that smile I used to get when we were happy together. But now, it was different. It wasn't for me anymore. I felt like I was watching someone else's life. It didn't feel real. I wasn't sure if they saw me. I didn't think they did. But I couldn't move, couldn't bring myself to leave. I didn't know what I was hoping for, honestly. Maybe for her to look over and apologize, to explain herself, to come running to me and say, "It's not what it looks like." But nothing happened. She just laughed again and got into the car with Victor. He slid in beside her like it was no big deal, like they were just two people sharing a ride home. It hit me all at once. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't just a dance lesson gone too long or some minor flirtation. This was something deeper, something that had been building for a while. I had suspected it, but now I knew. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and started filming. It wasn't something I had planned to do, but I had to get proof. I needed something to show her, to show myself, that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining all of this. They drove off, and I followed at a distance. It wasn't hard to keep up. They weren't driving fast, and I knew the roads around here well enough. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see. Maybe I thought they'd stop somewhere. Maybe I'd see them kiss or something more obvious. But nothing like that happened. They drove straight to Victor's apartment, parked, and walked inside together. No goodbyes. No nothing. Just them. I felt this sickening knot in my stomach. I should have gone up to them, confronted them right there, but I couldn't. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It wasn't because I was scared. It was because, deep down, I knew what was going on, and I didn't want to hear it from them. Not yet. So I drove home. I didn't know what to feel. I was angry, but also numb, like I was watching a train wreck happen but couldn't stop it. The whole way home, I kept thinking, this can't be happening. Not to me. Not to us. When I got to the house, I could hear the faint sound of her keys jangling in the front door. She was back. I knew she'd be walking in any minute. Part of me wanted to go straight up to her, ask her what the hell was going on, but I knew that wouldn't help. She'd lie. I could already hear it in my head, the excuses, the justifications, the denial. Instead, I stayed in the living room, my heart racing. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to lose control. I just wanted her to face what she had done, without me having to beg her to admit it. Anna walked in, her face bright from the cold evening air. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, she froze for a moment, like she was caught off guard. I saw it. The way her eyes darted to the phone in my hand, the way her posture shifted. She had a million lies in her head, and I knew it. "Hey, you're home early," she said, trying to act casual, like nothing had changed. But there was something off about her tone, something that made my blood boil. She didn't even look at me the same way anymore. It was like she was trying to avoid it all. Avoid me. I didn't say anything. I just watched her as she moved through the house, pretending everything was normal. But I couldn't. I knew. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her everything I knew, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had the proof now. The video, the photos, the entire picture. She couldn't lie her way out of this anymore. I stayed quiet for a moment, just staring at Anna as she moved around the kitchen, pretending nothing was wrong. She poured herself a glass of wine, humming like it was just another evening. But I could barely breathe. I was suffocating, every second feeling heavier than the last. I needed to say something, to make her see that I wasn't just going to sit there and let this happen. "Anna." My voice was steady, but it didn't feel like mine. She turned, almost too quickly, like she was caught off guard. "What's wrong?" she asked, that fake sweetness creeping into her tone. I couldn't hold back anymore. "I know what's going on," I said. It came out cold but firm. Her face dropped for just a second. I saw the guilt flash before she hid it behind that mask of hers. She tried to brush it off. "What are you talking about?" she asked, a little too defensively. I didn't hesitate. "You and Victor. I saw you both tonight." Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything right away. Instead, she tried to act casual, reaching for the wine again. But I wasn't letting her off the hook that easily. I held up my phone, showing her the video, the undeniable proof. She glanced at it, but quickly looked away, a sickly shade of red creeping into her face. She opened her mouth, like she was about to speak, but she couldn't find the words. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper now. "Don't try to lie your way out of this. I saw everything. You and him. So close, so comfortable. Don't tell me it's nothing." She shifted uncomfortably, trying to change the subject, but I wasn't having it. "You've been lying to me for months. The late classes, the excuses, the way you talk about him. I wasn't stupid. I saw it. I know what's been going on." Her eyes flicked around the room like she was searching for an escape. "You don't understand," she muttered, but her words sounded hollow. She knew there was no way out. I shook my head. "No. You don't understand. You've been cheating on me, and you thought I wouldn't find out." She looked like she was about to cry, but the anger inside me kept me from feeling any sympathy. She was trying to hold it together, but I wasn't letting her. "Just admit it," I said, my voice shaking now. "You've been sleeping with him. Don't keep lying." There was silence between us for a moment, and I could see the struggle in her eyes. But she didn't fight me. She just stood there, her shoulders slumped, defeated. Finally, she let out a sigh. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. Bitterly. "Really? It's not? Then what is it, Anna? Tell me." She opened her mouth to respond, but stopped herself, not knowing what to say. She knew I had the truth, and there was no way to talk her way out of it. "You need to leave," I said suddenly, the words coming out cold, sharper than I'd planned. "I want you out of this house. I'm done with this. Don't come back." She didn't say anything after that. Just stood there, staring at me like she couldn't believe what I'd just said. But I wasn't going to wait for her to argue, to apologize, or to make excuses. It was over. I turned and walked toward the door, not looking back. There was nothing else to say. I didn't stay in the house after I told her to leave. I couldn't. The air felt thick, suffocating, and the silence was unbearable. My body was on autopilot, my hands shaking as I grabbed my jacket and keys, heading out the door like I was running away from something, but I wasn't sure what. Her absence in the house was deafening. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I just drove. Around Tallinn, through the streets I'd passed 1,000 times, but they all felt foreign now. I drove in circles for a while, trying to outrun the burning knot in my stomach. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Something darker. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I felt empty. It was late when I finally pulled into a quiet parking lot by the harbor. I parked and just sat there for a while, staring out at the water. I knew I had to make a decision, but I didn't know what it was yet. Eventually, I called my brother, Jonas. He was the only one I could think of who might actually understand, and even if he didn't, I needed to hear another voice. I needed to not feel so alone. "Yeah." His voice was groggy, like I'd woken him up, but when I heard his tone shift, I knew he was awake now. "What's going on, man? You okay?" I didn't know how to start, so I just said it. "Anna's been cheating on me." It came out flat, like I was saying the weather was bad. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, "Jesus, Richard. What? Are you sure? I saw them. Together. Victor. Her dance trainer. I saw them tonight," I said, my voice wavering now that I was saying it out loud. "I followed them. I watched them get in the car and go to his place. I've got the proof on my phone." I didn't even know why I was still holding the damn thing. It felt like a weight in my hand. I could hear him take a breath. "Damn, man. I'm so sorry. That's rough." "Yeah, well," I said, trying to keep it together, but the words came out ragged. "I told her to leave. Told her I wanted her gone." "You did the right thing," Jonas said. "You can't let her stay. You don't owe her anything." I didn't know if I believed that, but it felt like something I should hold on to. The guilt was already starting to creep in. I felt like I was supposed to feel more. Something. Sad, maybe. But all I felt was numb. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I was just done. "I don't know what to do now, man," I admitted. "I don't even know where to go from here. I feel like I'm stuck in some nightmare I can't wake up from." "You've got to take it one step at a time," he said. "Just take it slow. You'll figure it out." I was silent for a long time after that. I didn't feel much better, but I did feel a little less alone. Sometimes, that's all you need. Someone who understands, even if they don't have all the answers. We talked for a little while longer. He said I should stay with him for a bit, but I couldn't bring myself to go back to anyone's place. I needed space. I needed to be alone for a while. When I finally hung up, I stayed in the car, staring out at the dark water. The only sound was the faint hum of the city in the distance, but my mind was a storm. I kept thinking about Anna, about Victor, about everything I thought I knew, everything that I had believed in for so long. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the life I had signed up for. This wasn't the future I had imagined with her. I didn't know what kind of revenge I was looking for yet, but I was already planning it. Maybe not right now, but soon. Something in me had snapped. There would be consequences for this. For her. For what she did to me. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The next day, the house felt colder, emptier. Anna was gone, and the silence was crushing. My mind kept replaying what had happened, what I had seen. I couldn't escape it, and I couldn't just sit around and pretend everything was okay anymore. I needed to do something. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I spent the morning going over the video and photos of her and Victor, again and again. Each time I saw them together, something inside me twisted. The anger burned hotter. But more than that, I felt this overwhelming need to make her face what she'd done. She wasn't going to slide by on some excuse. Around noon, I decided to call her. I didn't want to drag this out. I wasn't going to beg for answers or explanations. I was done. When she picked up, her voice sounded tired. "What's going on, Richard?" I didn't waste time. "I want you to come get your things," I said, trying to keep it steady. "I'm not doing this over the phone. You're leaving, and if you don't file for the divorce, I'll make sure your family knows exactly what's been going on." There was silence on the other end for a moment. I could hear her breathing, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make herself the victim. But I wasn't giving her the chance. "You're serious?" she finally asked, her voice almost pleading. "Yeah, I'm serious," I said. "Just come pick up your stuff. Don't come back here." She muttered something about it being a mistake, but I didn't want to hear it. "Fine," she said finally, "I'll come get my stuff." And with that, she hung up. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the phone. It felt like a weight lifted, but at the same time, it felt like nothing had changed. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't relief. It was just a void. A few hours later, Anna arrived. She was carrying her bags, her face pale, and her eyes red like she hadn't slept. She didn't say anything at first, just walked through the door, her shoulders tense. I stayed quiet as she packed up the last of her things. I could hear her fumbling around, her movements slow and hesitant. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Maybe a part of me wanted to still care, but the anger and betrayal were too strong. When she was finished, she grabbed the car keys from the counter, and for a brief moment, she paused. "I never meant for this to happen, Richard," she said softly, almost like she was trying to convince herself. I looked at her, but didn't say a word. What was there to say? She'd made her choice, and I wasn't going to be the one to fix it. She turned to leave, and before she walked out the door, she hesitated again. "Goodbye," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. I didn't answer. I just watched her walk away. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed felt final. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt empty. It was over. The life I'd thought I had was gone, and I was left standing there, trying to figure out what came next. The next few days were a blur. Anna was gone. The house was still too quiet, her absence hanging like a cloud. But the anger, the hurt, that fire inside me, it didn't die. If anything, it grew. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something more, something final, something that would make sure she never forgot what she'd done. I couldn't just let her walk away from this, not after everything, not after what I'd seen. I spent hours that night pacing the house, staring at the piles of her things. Her clothes, the little trinkets she left behind, the stupid knickknacks we had picked out together when we moved in. I wanted to throw it all away, every last thing. But it wasn't enough. That wouldn't make her feel the weight of her betrayal. I grabbed a box from the garage. I started with her documents, the ones that proved her lies. The paperwork for the dance classes, the receipts for dinners and gifts I hadn't known about. I threw it all in piece by piece. Then I added the little gifts I had bought her over the years, necklaces, earrings, flowers, all the things I had thought meant something at the time. The roses I'd bought her for her birthday, the ones I had never given her, they were in there too. All of it. I paused for a second, looking at the pile. There was a voice in the back of my head telling me to stop, that it was too much, that I was crossing some line. But I didn't listen. She had crossed a line first. I found the gasoline in the shed. It smelled thick and sharp, like something bad was about to happen. I poured it over the pile, drenched it all. The clothes, the documents, the gifts, they were all soaked. My hands shook as I struck the match. The flames caught instantly. At first, it was a small spark, but within seconds, the fire grew, crackling and roaring. It felt satisfying, in a sick, twisted way. Watching everything burn, watching the life I thought I had with Anna turn to ash. It was the only way I could feel like I had some control. I stood there for a while, staring at the fire, listening to it crackle. The heat on my face, the smell of burning paper, It was like some twisted form of closure. But even as I watched the flames rise, I knew it wasn't enough. Nothing was. I burned her things, but I couldn't burn the betrayal out of my mind. When the fire finally started to die down, I stood there for a long time, just watching the last embers glow. I didn't feel free. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt done. The chapter was closed. Anna was gone, her things were gone, but the feeling, the sting, would never really go away. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how to move on from this. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. She'd made her choice, and now it was my turn. A week passed since Anna left, and I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. The anger still burned, but I was starting to feel numb too. The house felt quieter, emptier. I kept waiting for the feeling of closure, but it never came. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call. It was Anna. My heart dropped when I saw her name on the screen, but I answered. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Richard, we need to talk," she said, her voice soft. There was something in her tone, something I couldn't place. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe she just wanted to spin more lies. "I think we've talked enough," I said. "You've made your choices." "I'm not lying," she said quickly. "Just, please let me explain. I owe you that much." Part of me wanted to hang up, but another part needed to hear what she'd say. Maybe I was hoping for some kind of truth, something that would help me close this chapter. "Fine," I said. "But this better not be more excuses." She asked to meet. I agreed, against my better judgment. We met at a small cafe later that afternoon. Anna looked composed, like she had pulled herself together for this. But she still didn't seem like the woman I once knew. She sat across from me, staring down at her coffee, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, "I never wanted to hurt you, Richard. I don't know how it happened. I was lonely. You were always working, and Victor. He listened. He made me feel seen. I could feel the rage rising again." "So, you used him to fill the gap? You didn't care about me at all?" "No, it's not like that," she replied, her voice shaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I regret it. I regret everything. I didn't buy it. You don't regret it. You regret getting caught." She flushed, but didn't deny it. "I don't know what to say anymore. I want to fix things." I leaned back, bitter laughter escaping. "You can't fix this. You don't get to walk back into my life after everything you've done." She sat there for a moment, silent. Then she stood up, chair scraping across the floor. "I'm sorry, Richard. For everything." I didn't respond. What was left to say? She walked out, and I sat there, numb. She had apologized, but it didn't change anything. It didn't fix the damage. It didn't give me the closure I thought it would. As I watched her leave, I realized something. It was truly over. But the emptiness inside me didn't go away. I wasn't the man who married her anymore. That guy was gone. And I didn't know who I was now. In the days that followed, I went through the motions. I went to work, ate when I remembered to, and slept only when exhaustion hit me hard enough to knock me out. But the anger, it lingered. And so did the emptiness. The worst part? I didn't know what to do with myself. I was stuck in this weird limbo, where I wasn't the same person I had been before Anna betrayed me, but I also didn't know how to move forward. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that everything I had believed in, everything I had thought was real, had been a lie. The person I had shared my life with wasn't who I thought she was. The first week after she left, I didn't hear from Anna at all. No texts, no calls. Not even an apology letter. Nothing. Part of me expected that, but the other part, still clinging to some idea that maybe she'd realize the gravity of what she had done, kept hoping she'd reach out. But that was it. The silence spoke louder than any words ever could. It was a clean break, and in some ways, I had no idea whether to feel relieved or resentful. Then one evening, out of the blue, I got a message. It was from Anna's best friend, Clara. "Richard," the message read, "I don't know if you're ready for this, but Anna's been telling people you were the one who kicked her out. She said you were abusive and that you forced her into the affair. I just wanted to warn you in case it comes back to you. The words hit me like a slap in the face. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, my stomach sinking with each word. Anna was telling people I was the bad guy? She was painting herself as the victim, like I was the one who'd pushed her into someone else's arms? I couldn't believe it. I texted back, "Tell her to stop lying. She knows the truth. I've got proof. I'm not the one who cheated. She is." Clara didn't respond for a while, but a few hours later, I got another message. This time, it was just a link to a post on social media. A public post from Anna's account. Some people can't handle the truth. I tried to make it work, but I'm better off alone. Sometimes, you have to walk away from toxic relationships for your own sanity. Goodbye, Richard. I stared at the words, my pulse racing. She was twisting everything, rewriting history as if she hadn't just ripped apart the life we built together. I could feel the anger rising again, but this time, it was sharper. The audacity, the selfishness of it all. I couldn't stand it. I took a deep breath and composed myself. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I needed to set the record straight. So I did what any pissed-off ex-husband would do. I posted my own response. I shared the video of her and Victor in the car. The proof of her affair. I included screenshots of the texts she'd sent, her excuses, her lies. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it because I wasn't going to let her turn me into the villain when she was the one who'd betrayed me. The fallout was immediate. Her family called me, furious, blaming me for airing dirty laundry. But the thing is, I didn't care anymore. Anna had done enough damage. If she wanted to paint me as the villain, fine. But I was done letting her control the narrative. It was like the moment I hit send, a weight lifted off my chest. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was vindictive. But I wasn't going to be made out to be the bad guy in all of this. Not anymore. As the days passed, Anna didn't try to contact me again. No apology, no remorse, not even a word of explanation. It was like I had never mattered to her at all. And maybe, in the end, that was the hardest part to accept. The fallout from my post didn't come as a surprise, but it still hit harder than I expected. Anna's family called me furious, accusing me of being petty and vindictive. Her mother was especially vocal, shouting about how I was ruining Anna's life and how she could never understand why I would expose everything so publicly. To be honest, I didn't care. At that point, it didn't matter to me what anyone thought. Anna had made her choice, and she had to face the consequences. She couldn't just walk away from everything she had done without anyone knowing the truth. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed some line. The video, the texts, I'd put it all out there. And I couldn't undo it. Sure, it felt good in the moment, like I was finally regaining control of a situation I had no control over for so long. But the next morning, as I sat in my kitchen with my coffee, I felt hollow. Like the act of exposing her didn't make me feel any better. It didn't take away the betrayal or the hurt. It just made everything uglier. I didn't hear from Anna directly after that. Not a word. But I did hear from people who still had some connection to her. Mutual friends, acquaintances, all telling me how heartbroken Anna was. How she felt betrayed by what I had done. She even told some people that I was the one who had forced her into the affair, which was just another lie I had to ignore. The thing is, I was starting to get used to the lies. I wasn't shocked anymore. Anna had built this whole story around herself, and in her mind, I was the villain. She couldn't accept that she was the one who had broken everything. And frankly, I didn't need her to. It wasn't about proving anything to her anymore. It was about finding some peace for myself. A few days later, I found out she'd moved in with Victor, the guy who had taken my place. The guy who, as far as I was concerned, was just as guilty. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't want to waste any more energy on it. Still, there was this gnawing emptiness. It wasn't a pain I could shake. The truth was, even with her gone, the damage was done. My trust had been shattered, and no amount of time or distance was going to change that. The relationship I had with Anna, the life we built, it was over. And the hardest part was that, no matter what I did, no matter what I told myself, it still felt like I had lost something. Something I couldn't get back. I couldn't blame anyone else for that feeling. The truth was, I had given so much of myself to that relationship. And now, it was gone. I had no idea what the future looked like. I didn't know who I was anymore or what I wanted. The anger had faded a little, but in its place was this deep, dull ache. A sense of being lost. But I was starting to understand something important. The pain wasn't something I could just push away. It wasn't something I could burn away in a fire, or expose to the world in some post. It was something I had to sit with, to face, even though it was uncomfortable. And that was the hardest part of all. Weeks passed, and the anger began to fade, replaced by something deeper. It wasn't relief or closure. It was emptiness. The silence in the house was deafening. I didn't know how to fill it. The life I had shared with Anna was gone, and I was left trying to figure out who I was without her. I spent more time at work, staying busy to avoid thinking about it. But when I came home, the loneliness was there, hanging over everything. I walked around the city, trying to keep moving, but I was restless. I didn't have anyone to talk to. My friends didn't know what to say, and Anna's family wasn't on my side. I was alone in this. One night, I ended up at a bar. Just a small place, not far from my apartment. I wasn't there to drown my sorrows, but the drinks helped numb the thoughts. Mark, the bartender, struck up a conversation. After a few rounds, I found myself spilling everything. Anna, the affair, the betrayal. I wasn't expecting advice, but Mark's words hit me harder than I expected. You can't spend your life trying to fix someone else's mistakes, he said. It's done. You can't change what she did, but you can change how you handle it. It was simple, but it stuck. I had been holding on to the pain for so long, letting it control me. But maybe it was time to let it go. I wasn't ready to forgive Anna, but I didn't have to let her actions ruin my future. I left the bar that night feeling a little lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I finally realized I couldn't keep living in the past. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to start moving forward, even if it was just a small step. I didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, I felt like I might be able to find some peace. It wasn't like everything magically got better after that night at the bar. I didn't suddenly wake up the next day feeling whole again, or like the past few months had been some bad dream. No, the emptiness was still there, lurking. But I did start making small changes. I started going to the gym more, something I hadn't done in months. I hadn't realized how out of shape I'd gotten until I looked in the mirror one morning and saw someone I didn't recognize. Tired, beaten down, like I'd given up without even noticing. It wasn't just physical. It was mental too. The weight of everything I'd been through had started to show. So I figured if I couldn't fix the past, maybe I could work on the present. I threw myself into the workouts, pushing myself harder than I had in a long time. I didn't have any clear goals, no specific targets in mind. It was more about feeling like I was doing something for myself again. I started to feel the soreness in my muscles, and strangely, it was comforting. At least I was doing something, even if it was small. It was something I could control. Around this time, I also started to reconnect with some old friends. Friends I hadn't seen in years. We met up for a drink, or just a chat, like nothing had changed. It felt good to be around people who didn't know about Anna, who didn't know about the mess. They just knew me, the guy I had been before all this happened. One of them, Mike, even suggested I go on a trip. You need to get away, man. A change of scenery. Forget all this for a while. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to run away from my problems. But then I realized, maybe that's exactly what I needed. A break from the place that had been full of memories with Anna. A chance to breathe without the constant reminder of everything I had lost. So, I booked a trip. Nothing fancy, just a week in the countryside, a few hours away from Tallinn. It wasn't about escape. It was about starting fresh. Getting out of my head for a while, and giving myself space to think. I left with a few simple goals in mind. Clear my head, focus on myself, and maybe, just maybe, begin to understand who I was without Anna. The trip wasn't life-changing, but it was exactly what I needed. I spent the days walking through forests, reading, and enjoying the silence. There were no phone calls, no reminders of the life I'd left behind. It gave me a bit of peace, something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. When I came back, things didn't magically fall into place. But I was different. Maybe not completely healed, but definitely moving in the right direction. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was beginning to see that I could find a way forward, even if it was slow, even if it was hard. One step at a time. Coming back from the trip was harder than I expected. The silence of the house hit me like a punch, and I couldn't escape the memories of Anna. It was like everything in the house still had traces of her, from the clothes in the closet to the photos on the walls. I thought I had moved on, but being back made it clear I hadn't fully faced it all. One evening, I found myself going through things I'd packed away after she left. I hadn't touched any of it until now. Her books, the pictures, little gifts. I thought about throwing it all out, but I couldn't bring myself to. I went through the pictures, remembering the happy moments, our wedding day, vacations, those quiet nights. It hurt. I thought I was ready to move on, but seeing those memories only made the pain sharper. It was like I couldn't escape the past, no matter how hard I tried. I found the necklace I'd bought her before everything fell apart. I had planned to give it to her on our anniversary, but that never happened. Holding it in my hands, I felt this deep sadness, this realization that everything I had believed in was gone. It wasn't relief. It wasn't closure. It was just loss. I thought about getting rid of everything, but I realized it wasn't about what I did with her stuff. It was about what I chose to carry with me. I kept a few things, small memories that felt worth holding on to, and packed the rest away. I wasn't trying to forget, but I needed to let go. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean, but it was a step forward. And for the first time, I felt like I was ready to move on, piece by piece. The weeks after I packed away, Anna's things were quiet. At first, I was afraid the silence would swallow me whole, but after a while, it became more comfortable. Less like emptiness, and more like space. Room to breathe, room to think, room to rebuild. It felt like I was starting fresh, even if it was a slow process. I threw myself into work again, but this time, with more focus. I'd always been dedicated to my job, but after Anna, it had felt like a distraction. Now, I found myself actually wanting to be there. I took on new projects, volunteered for extra tasks. It felt good to be useful again, to feel like I was moving forward in some direction, even if I still didn't know exactly where that was. One thing I realized during this time was that I hadn't been living for myself for a long while. I'd been living for Anna, for us, for this future I thought we were building. And somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of what I wanted, what I needed. It wasn't that I suddenly had all the answers, but I was starting to think about what I wanted my life to look like without her. I started making small changes. I went out with friends more often, got involved in a few hobbies I had let slip over the years. I even started taking cooking classes. I wasn't trying to fill the void Anna left, but I was learning to fill my own time, to reclaim my life. It wasn't a perfect solution, and I still had moments when I thought about her, about what could have been. But these moments were less frequent, less sharp. I wasn't ignoring the past anymore. I was just learning how to live without it controlling me. One day, I ran into an old acquaintance from my college days. Peter, a guy I used to hang out with before Anna and I became so consumed in each other. We caught up over a coffee, and it felt good. It felt like I was talking to someone who knew me, not the version of me that had been tangled in this mess with Anna. He didn't know the details of what had happened, but he could tell something was different. I think I was starting to look different, too. More at ease. More like myself again. "Whatever you're doing, it's working," he said as we parted ways. I don't know if I believed him then, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same guy I was when all this started. And that was a small victory. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was stuck. The future was still unclear, but I had started to carve out a new life for myself, one day at a time. Months passed, and things started to settle into a new normal. I wasn't over everything, and I didn't expect to be. But I was starting to get used to the idea that healing wasn't linear. Some days felt like a step forward, others like 2 steps back. But I was getting through them. I had a moment of clarity one evening. It was a random Wednesday night, and I was sitting on the couch, catching up on a show I'd been watching. The house felt quieter than usual, but not in a bad way. Just Calm. My phone buzzed, and I saw an email from Anna. It had been months since I'd heard from her, and I didn't know what to expect. The email was brief, nothing dramatic. She was checking in, she said. She didn't want to reopen old wounds, but she wanted me to know that she had been thinking about me and how everything ended. She was sorry for what happened, but there was a part of me that didn't really believe the apology. She said she hoped I was doing well, and that she was trying to make things work with Victor, but she didn't know where things were headed with him. I sat there staring at the screen for a while, reading the words over and over. It didn't sting like it used to. I didn't feel angry, or betrayed, or hurt. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did, in some way. But what I felt more than anything was this overwhelming sense of indifference. I had moved on. I didn't reply. I just deleted the email and put my phone down. It felt like the right thing to do. The woman who had been my wife, the one I had loved, was no longer the person I needed to respond to. The anger had faded, and the pain had lessened, but I had also grown to understand that I didn't need closure from her. I was closing the door myself. I realized then that this was my moment of freedom. I had spent so much time trying to piece things together, trying to figure out why things happened the way they did. But I wasn't going to find the answers from her. I had to find them within myself. I had to let go of the version of me that was stuck in the past, mourning what could have been. That night, I went to bed with a strange sense of peace. I didn't have everything figured out, but I didn't need to. I had learned that letting go didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean I was okay with what happened, but it meant I was finally free from it, and that felt like enough. Life has a way of moving on, whether you're ready or not. I spent so much time stuck on the past, trying to make sense of everything, that I didn't realize how much had changed. I wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. It wasn't perfect, but I could finally breathe without it feeling like a constant ache in my chest. I started meeting new people, just casually, not forcing anything. I went to work events, social gatherings, and before I knew it, I was enjoying the simple act of connecting with others again. It felt good to laugh, to talk without the past hanging over me. Slowly, I began to rediscover pieces of myself I had forgotten. One night, Mike invited me to meet his friend, Sarah, who had just moved to Tallinn. We hit it off instantly. There were no expectations, no drama. We just talked and had a good time. At the end of the night, she gave me her number. We started seeing each other casually, nothing serious, but it felt like a breath of fresh air. Of course, the memories of Anna didn't just vanish. There were moments when I thought about the betrayal, the anger. But with Sarah, I started to see that there was room for something new. Slowly, I stopped looking back and began focusing on what was in front of me. One evening, sitting with Sarah on a park bench, watching the sunset, I realized something. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking back at my past or waiting for closure. I wasn't stuck. I was finally at peace with where I was. Sarah smiled at me and said, "You seem at peace." I hadn't realized it until then, but she was right. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was okay with that. I was moving forward, taking it one day at a time, and that felt like enough.